Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the scariest thing that has ever happened to you, paranormal or otherwise? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I was alone in my apartment and I decided to take a shower. I locked the door out of habit. It can only be locked and unlocked from the inside. My clean and dirty clothes are thrown on the floor of the bathroom in two separate piles. When I finished taking the shower, my clothes, both dirty and clean, were neatly folded in two separate stacks on the floor. The door was still locked. I take very quick showers. This happened in the span of 5 minutes. I have no explanation, and I get goosebumps just thinking about it. This happened about a week ago, and nothing like it has happened prior or since. This story scares the crap out of me every time I think about it. I was at my grandparents' house one night. My grandmother then came into my room at 3:30 in the morning and told me, "Your grandfather needs your help, get up." This sort of startled me because she's never done anything like this. I go out to where my grandfather is right outside the door that goes into the garage, and he tells me, "The garage door just went up and down 6 or 7 times. We need to check it out." I obviously said all right, and we went into the garage only to find the pull string that prevents the door from opening, which can only be pulled from the inside. He looks at me and says, "We have to go outside to fix it so no one can get in." We then headed outside, and when we rounded the corner to look at the garage, the motion lights came on and there seemed to be scratches on the door. He and I fixed the door and went back to bed. About 2 weeks after this, I was staying there again and woke up at around 2:30 in the morning to hear stomping in the kitchen, which is very close to my room. I get up and hear the stomps come closer to my door and stop. I figured that my grandfather was adjusting the thermostat. I opened my door to see what was going on, only to find that everyone in the house was asleep and all the lights were turned off. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night. A few weeks passed and I went over there on a weekend because I had nothing better to do. Since it was a weekend, I stayed up rather late and fell asleep watching TV on my bed with my door open. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and for whatever reason, I woke up without any reason. I look around and realize that I've fallen asleep with the TV on. I looked at my door, and at that instant, I saw a man-sized figure step out of my doorway and walk down the hall toward the kitchen. I slammed my door and stayed up all night. By this time, I was pretty convinced I had a demon, ghost, or something in my grandparents' house. I was just relieved that whatever was in their house wasn't following me. Maybe a month after the last incident happened, I was at my dad's house, and I was about to go to sleep. At my dad's, I'm on the other side of the house from everyone. It was maybe 10:30 at night, and I was about to go to sleep. I'd laid down, turned my TV off, and was drifting to sleep. Then outside of my door, I heard a combination of stomping and a really low sound. This honestly scared the hell out of me. I, in all of my infinite wisdom, decided to see what it was. When I opened my door, I saw the same thing that I saw at my grandparents' house. I teared up from fear, left the light on, and fitfully tried to sleep. It didn't work well. Maybe a month and a half had passed since the last incident. I was at a friend's house, and he and I cleaned out his shed so we could just hang out in there and smoke his hookah. He usually has a lot of people over to his house, but this night it was just him and me. We were smoking hookah and were almost finished. We were just listening to some music, and I was just sitting there listening to music when all of a sudden, a black flash darted underneath me, but I didn't feel anything. I started to look around to see if one of my cats came in with us. As I started to look around, my legs realized there was no cat in the shed. I start to become afraid on the inside, but I try to keep myself outwardly calm. I look up at my friend, who has the look of being close to panic, and all he says to me is, "I think something just ran underneath your legs." At this point, I started freaking out because I didn't say anything about it. He told me that he saw it as well. We both ran out of the shed and went into his house, where we just watched TV until we calmed down and went to sleep. This was the last time anything like that had happened. This was maybe 3 weeks ago. I saw this question and figured this could be a good read for someone. TLDR, I have a demon, and it's scary. The house I grew up in was very strange. My friends did not like to spend the night there and said that they had weird dreams there. At night, it often sounded like someone was moving furniture around in the living room. My mom and I would randomly smell cigar smoke when no one was in the house. We would catch movement out of the side of our eyes and nothing was there. Our dogs would suddenly leap up and follow something with their eyes, or would start wagging their tails for no apparent reason. I once had a dream about a man wearing a red plaid shirt with black hair and a mustache leaning on the fence in the backyard. It was so striking that it just stuck with me for about a week before I mentioned it to my mom, and she had experienced a dream about the man in the past. We think that might explain the cigar smell. I was once home by myself and washing dishes when I heard the wood floor creaking behind me like someone was walking on it. I spun around, no one was there. I went back to washing dishes, and there were a few creaks closer. I turned around and asked whatever it was to stop. It did. The most unexplainable thing happened one night when I woke up to a scratching and rustling noise in my room. I thought that someone had broken into the house and was in my room, so I laid still for about 10 minutes as the noise continued. The music from the music box on my shelf started playing. I flipped over in bed and no one was there. My bedroom door was closed and my dog was standing on the other side of the room, staring at the bookcase where my music box was. I got out of bed and saw that the drawer had been pulled out, hence the slow scraping noise, and that it had finally been pulled out enough to trigger the music. It was on a flat surface, so it couldn't have slowly slipped, and it was too high for my dog to reach, even if he had the capability of being able to bother it. My mom said that the people my parents bought the house from were a widowed father and a young daughter. His wife had died from cancer in a home hospice in the house. She said that when I was a baby, she would hear me laughing and babbling when I was alone in my crib, and when she would look in the nursery, I would be looking up at something. For some reason, she felt like it was connected to the woman. Not paranormal, but spooky as all hell. I was in high school and am still living in my family home in Queensland, Australia. My parents were going away for the weekend, and we had just been broken into the previous week, so I was still feeling a little rattled, and I specifically asked my sister to make sure she slept at ours that weekend. Of course, I get a text from her around 11 p.m. on a Saturday night saying she was going to be staying at her friend's. So I put myself to bed feeling a little creeped out and half expecting someone to break through the door at any minute. It takes me ages to get to sleep, but I must have dozed off because the next thing I know, I'm waking up to an intensely loud noise. It takes me a few moments to register that it's music and that it's our stereo blasting at full volume at about 3 a.m. Knowing I'm home by myself, I can't figure out why it's on. I know my sister wouldn't come home and turn the stereo on, so I start to panic, thinking someone has broken in and turned the stereo on to freak me out. I desperately grope around my bed in darkness, trying to find my phone, and then I realize that for the first time in my life, I didn't take my mobile into the bedroom with me that night, and I can picture it sitting on my kitchen bench where I left it. I must have had a hit of adrenaline at this point, because for some unknown reason, I decided to just go for it. I throw my door open and scream my sister's name, hoping that either she will answer me or the intruder will think multiple people are home and get the hell out of there. There's no response, but then the music begins to get quieter because the volume is being turned down. Although it kinda goes up and down for a bit, I step out into the hallway and then around the corner to the living room. I turn the light on expecting to see someone, but there's no one there. I should point out here that our house is on 3 separate levels, so the rest of the house is in darkness, and there are about 1 million places for someone to hide. I start to take a few steps into the living room and think about whether to run to the bathroom to lock myself in or make a dash down the stairs past the kitchen to grab my mobile and get the hell out of there. I'm about to make a run for it when I hear the stereo volume decreasing down to a very low volume, and I force myself to glance over in the corner at it. I have to look twice at what I see, thinking I was imagining things. A gecko had dropped from the ceiling and landed on the stereo. Turning it on with the impact of landing, the buttons for volume and on and off were positioned on top, and the gecko had been running over the stereo, probably startled by the noise, hence while the volume had been turning up and down. I think it took me about an hour to calm down after that, and I went through every room in the house before I could force myself to sleep at about 5 a.m. To this day, I've never gone to sleep without someone in my house. That bloody gecko robbed me of my sleeping innocence.
Creepy that is, this is also a good example of how sometimes some things can be explained without it being paranormal, but still scary as hell.
My story doesn't involve anything paranormal, but equality was frightening when it happened to me. I was 10 years old, and it was the day before Mother's Day, and my dad had taken my older sister and me to the mall to get her a present. This was like a weeknight though, so the mall was pretty dead aside from a bunch of mall rats, as my dad called them. They were just either really old people that sit on the benches and stare at people, or gothic teenagers who have all the piercings, mohawks, and stuff. Anyway, the shopping's done, and I have to go to the bathroom. My dad and sister wait on a bench, and I walk through these double doors that open up to a long corridor and lead to the bathrooms all the way at the end. I walk down and peek inside the bathroom. There are only 2 stalls, but for some reason the main door is propped open. I go in anyway because I really have to pee. So there I am, sitting on the toilet doing my business, when I hear voices coming down the corridor. They sounded like a group of teenage gothic mall rats. I stand up to flush the toilet and I'm about to open the door when I hear one of them come into the bathroom. I freeze because I thought it was weird for a guy to come into a girl's bathroom. There was a moment of complete silence, and then I saw a pair of heavy black boots approach my door. Then without hesitation, the guy just starts shaking the door really hard and violently, all while making some sort of weird animal-like noise. I sit back down in the toilet and almost start crying because I have no idea what's going on. The guy looks in the cracks in the door, and I can see that he has one of those huge septum rings, and it freaks me out even more. I hear the other guys that are standing in the corridor outside of the bathroom say, "Just grab her leg from underneath." And so this guy starts sticking his hand underneath trying to grab me. But I pull my legs up on the toilet and start hitting his hands with my little purse. Then he goes into the next stall and tries the same thing. The entire time he's like grunting and making weird sounds. I was so freaked out. I also couldn't speak for some reason. I was frozen and my mouth couldn't form any words. Then I hear one of them say something about a cop car parked out front, so they all leave through a side exit. I sat on the toilet paralyzed with fear, and my squeezed eyes shut for a good 5 minutes, trying to convince myself that it didn't all happen. But when I opened my eyes again, I could see the boot prints on the tiles on the floor, and it made me more scared. Finally, my sister comes in, asking me why I'm taking so long, and I burst out of the stall, crying my head off and booking it down the corridor and back to my dad. TLDR, I almost got kidnapped by some deranged goth kids in the bathroom of a mall. One night I went to take my dog for a walk at around 10:30. As soon as we're out of the door, he starts acting really agitated. I figured he just really needed to go. As we walk down the driveway, I hear a rustling from the tree in the neighbor's yard that's a few feet away and see a large, dark shape. We ran like hell to the street as a bear was now climbing down and was between us and the door. It wandered away without incident, and surprisingly, my dog still needed to poop. Well, when I was 10 years old, I lived in a house that gave you the creeps, even during the day. I'll never forget some of the things I saw or heard there. It was October 2003, and the day had been a calm, uneventful one. I had just fallen asleep, and the lights in the house were all out. I remember being shaken from my sleep in the sight of a shadowy figure hanging out on the stairs. Only half of its body was visible. It quickly ducked down, and I heard whispers, "He's still awake. We've got to wait." These entities, spirits, demons, whatever you want to call them, were planning on getting me that night. I quickly started screaming for my mother, who didn't believe me when she came to my room to comfort me. So there I was, all alone, in my dark room with two entities trying to get me. I tried to go back to sleep, but again I was quickly shaken by my feet and saw the two figures in the stairwell. I flipped over and covered myself in my blankets, but I felt something breathing on me. The sound of the heavy breathing shook me to my core. I cried for my mother again. She came this time and only told me to not think about them and that they would go away. They never went away. The voices I heard talking to each other about how they were coming to get me and how they were going to wait till I fell asleep. This is when the music started playing. It sounded like an ice cream truck was coming through or circus music, but who drives an ice cream truck and sits in front of someone's house at 4 a.m? I will never forget this night. Being woken up every time I even got close to drifting to sleep, the music, and being paralyzed by the fear of getting out of bed and what might be waiting for me. I later came to know these figures as the man with the hat and the tall dark figure. There was a third entity that stayed in the basement of the house that my brothers and I all saw at one time or another, crawling up the stairs to the kitchen slowly. A part of me wants to go back to that house and face my fears, but in reality, retelling the story brings me down to my knees in fear and uncertainty. On the paranormal side of things, I grew up in a house that was, years after we moved in, found to have a hidden torture chamber behind a false wall in the basement. A lot of unexplained things happened during the 14 years we lived there. One that particularly stands out happened when I was in my last year of elementary school. My youngest brother left when my mom went to work, and she would drop him off at a work school. Siblings were all in junior high or high school and left earlier than me, as their school started an hour earlier than mine. My father left before everyone at 5 a.m. every morning for work, so I was always the last one to leave on school days. One of my brothers, who was later diagnosed as bipolar, got into drugs the year before, so my parents put a deadbolt on their room to stop him from taking money or things to sell. It was always locked when they left, and this morning was no exception. I left as usual, got about a block and a half away, and realized I'd forgotten my math book. I ran back. I'd been gone for 3, maybe 4 minutes, but upon opening the door, so much had changed. My parents' bedroom door was wide open, the stereo on. It hadn't been on when I left. The door beside their dresser, which led to a second-story porch, was also open. Nobody in the room, nobody on the porch. Worse, though, was the door to the attic being open. It was never left open. I peered through the doorway, and halfway up the stair was our dog. It was a teacup poodle, small and very sweet, but right now she was standing, shaking on the stairs, her teeth bared, emitting a low growl. I went up as quietly as I could, keeping my eye on the dark blob of shadows at the top of the stairs. I'd just gotten to where I could reach her when it felt like a breeze hit me, carrying a sickly, sweet but rotten smell, not unlike the bottom of a well-used garbage can. There were no open windows in the attic. I reached down to pick up the dog, and when I looked up again, the shadow blob had moved. Scared now, I snatched the dog and ran down the stairs. Slamming the door shut, I ran down the other stairs to the first floor, still holding the dog, and out the door. I never told anyone about it. When I went home that day, my parents made no mention of their door being open or the stereo on, so I'm guessing that things were set right before they got there. For the rest of that school year, I went to my friend's house every morning to walk to school with her after my siblings left. When I was 16 and learning how to drive, I had something happen to me that I can't explain and that still creeps me out a bit to this day. I was out in a driving school vehicle with a driving instructor. We were probably an hour into the 2-hour session, It wasn't my first time driving, and it wasn't my first time driving with one of the school's instructors, so it was pretty calm and relaxed and pretty much knew what I was doing at this point. Anyway, we're headed down the road and approaching a stop sign. It's still light enough to see what's coming without headlights, so it's not like it's hard to see. I was probably going maybe 35 or 40 miles per hour. It was in a residential area, but on the edge of it. No homes were along the road I was traveling or down the street with the stop sign. It was a four-way stop because as we approached, I remember seeing people stopped on the cross street waiting. Maybe 200 to 300 yards away from the stop sign, the driving instructor says to me, "Make sure you stop at the stop sign ahead." I think to myself, why would you just remind me to stop at the sign? And then say out loud, "Yep," just to humor her and be nice. It's still pretty far away, so it was a pretty odd reminder. The next moment, I consciously remember being on the same road but being 200 to 300 yards past the stop sign. I don't remember stopping. I don't even know if I did or not. I have no memory of it. We've all had that autopilot thing where you just suddenly realize you're 5 miles down the road on the interstate going 60, but this isn't that kind of experience. Just as my conscious mind picks up and realizes that we're past the stop sign and I have no memory of the past 2 to 3 minutes, the driving instructor turns to me and says, "Did we stop at that sign?" I looked over at her and we both knew. We didn't even need to say it. We both knew. It didn't need to be discussed. Neither of us remembered if we stopped at the stop sign. We don't know what happened for those 2 to 3 minutes.